Frontier Opening Bell, welcome to the show. I'm Temple Ashaju. Joining us this morning, Ali Kansachu from Nairobi, Kenya. Good morning, Ali. Thank you for coming through. Bosina Mofaye, our executive editor here at Frontier Africa Reports. Thanks a great deal for being on the show this morning. How did the markets open yesterday? The Nigerian exchange remained down at 14 basis points for Friday because there was a public holiday in Nigeria. The BRVM stock exchange commenced the week positively, 0.20% on Monday. Egyptian Stock Exchange up 0.47% on Monday, starting the week strong as well. The Nairobi Securities Exchange was also positive to 3 basis points. Johannesburg Stock Exchange positive as well, opened northwards by some 32 basis points on Monday. If the Nigerian exchange had opened, perhaps it would have been green all through as well. Let's move on to the East African headlines, where we've got quite a number of key stories coming out of that country, or the countries in that region. That block has got the Capital Market Authority in Kenya. The chief, Wycliffe Shamiah, joins IOSCO board. Naivas IFC to improve food safety standards in stores. Ken Switch names Karimi Ithau as managing director. Williamson Tea, Kenya, warns of lower profits in the full year 2021. East African countries are to spend some 46.4 trillion shillings to service their debts in the next fiscal year commencing next month. Ali, we'll start with you to help us get some perspectives and analysis out of these headlines.
Yes, good morning. Let me start with the debt headline, 46.4 trillion shillings. Look, I think this phenomena is not unique to East Africa, but essentially East African countries had leveraged their balance sheets a great deal going into the pandemic. So somewhere like Kenya, our debt to GDP ratio is around 70 to 71%, and that's excluding state-owned enterprise debt. And this year and next year, debt repayments will take up 66% of every shilling of tax revenue raised. So, when one looks at the scenario, one's got to look at the optics of the debt to GDP ratio, but one's also got to look at affordability. Kenya is, Uganda is a similar example, maybe not as extreme as Kenya. Tanzania typically and historically have run a more conservative balance sheet. So therefore, the situation is not as extreme in Tanzania. What's happened since the pandemic is that a lot of the multilaterals like the IMF and the World Bank have stepped into the breach, which has allowed East African countries to reduce the interest rates on a portion of that debt that they owe. But make no mistake, there is a great deal of debt. It remains an unresolved issue. There has been some movement to try and kick the can down the road by reducing interest rates and participating in the debt program. But, it really requires a return to faster growth and an improvement in government revenues. And it's unlikely, I think, to happen in the next 12 months, in my view, in part because as you know, in Africa, we are now seeing a third wave. Dr. Maletsi of WHO warned us a couple of weeks ago, and all the numbers are now going in the wrong direction. Out of the top 10 countries with the fastest R growth, 9 are in Africa. So that is going to, I think, be a dampener on a return to growth. And then, economies, big parts of our economies remain soft. Take tourism, for example, which is more than $1 billion number in Kenya. And, our tourism numbers and our hotel occupancy numbers are really, really soft. And I think will remain so through the end of the year. So it remains a big challenge. We're grateful to the support that we're receiving, but I think governments still haven't bitten the bullet, and that is reducing the recurrent expenditure component of government. And until that really happens, I don't see that we're going to resolve this issue yet. To go to your other headlines, Williamson Tea warning of lower profits. This is one of the listed tea companies. It's more than about 100 years old. Tea prices, ironically, have not participated in this tremendous rally we've seen in the commodity market space. Even food prices, as you know, have hit highs not seen since 2011. But sadly, tea has not participated in that rally, and hence we can expect a challenge for tea companies and income. Of course, we spoke about it before. The KTDA, the Kenya Tea Development Authority, is looking to list its shares at the Nairobi Securities Exchange, and they are the biggest single player in the tea space. Quickly, if I can just touch on Naivas. Naivas is one of our supermarkets. You remember our supermarket profile was very much dominated by Nakumatt. Nakumatt then unfortunately hit the rocks. Naivas is an interesting indigenous brand. We also have Carrefour, which is very dominant in the upper echelon. But Naivas is competing very effectively in the big middle space of the market. They've been funded by some private equity out of France and the IFC. And as a customer, I can say, look, they really are doing extremely well. I think, an improvement of food safety standards is a win-win for them as a brand and for the consumer, because as you know, there are many issues around food safety standards in Kenya, and I'm sure in the rest of Africa as well.
Thank you very much, Ali, for these contributions this morning. Bosun, a quick thoughts?
Yeah, I think we've got a whole lot of grounds to cover on the West Coast.
All right, then we'll move on there now. But before we do that, let's introduce Joshua Debisi, who just joined us from Vetiva Capital Management. Thank you, Joshua, for coming through this morning. Now, let's look at the Western African and Nigerian market headlines, where the World Bank has just unveiled, or is to unveil, Nigeria's half-year development reports today at 10 a.m. That's in the next few minutes. World Bank also has just injected some $465 million for energy expansion in West Africa. A co-corporation sells 110 million shares to Geoff Ohen Limited at 4 naira per share. FMDQ got some Mixed Star Real Estate PLC listing its over 1 billion naira series 36 commercial paper. Niger public debt rises 18% to 3.5 trillion CFA franc in the year 2020. And Ghanaian miners seek exploration incentives, even as they try to grapple with the effects of COVID-19. Talking about debts now, Ali just mentioned or explained the East African countries' debts. Bosun, let's hear your thoughts on this debt as it relates to Niger public debts, which has risen by 18% in the year 2020.
Well, I think Ali puts it succinctly when he says it's not only a Kenyan story. Nigeria ran up about 6.6 trillion naira deficit for full year 2020, according to the report we got last week from the Ministry of Finance and the budget office. Fourth quarter was about 1.46 trillion naira. At the end of the day, we did about 16% deficit of the GDP for the full of last year. What's the size of the budget itself, by the way? So when you look at the deficit issue and the debt financing, the ways and means right now, the balance on the books of the central bank and the Ministry of Finance is in the north of 4 trillion naira or thereabout. How this will be cleared up is anyone's guess moving forward. So it's all likely going to keep rolling on this way all the way to 2023 when we go for another elections here in Nigeria. So it's not going to go anywhere. There's no way you can clear up 4 trillion plus between now and 2023. It's going to take a whole lot of magic, considering your exchange rate, the country is very poor financial inflows or fiscal balance, in a manner of speaking. So let's just leave it at that point. I want to touch on very quickly, and I'm sure Ali will speak to this maybe very quickly within the show, about the G7 DFIs, the AFDB, the EIB, the ERP, the $80 billion funding that they're putting together. They promised to give Africa to mitigate the impact of COVID-19. This is the first time we're seeing such a funding coming up. I don't know what Ali's thoughts or Joshua Davis's thoughts are on that particular one. For Nigeria, we have quite a number of stories today. We had a groundbreaking for the NLNG Train-7 happening at about 10 o'clock. Inflation for the month of May is also expected this morning, based on the calendar of the MBS, by the way. Of course, you can't tweet in Nigeria, so we're not expecting to see any tweet from Yemi Kale, the Statistician General. But at least some forecasts are we're going to come in at about 18.1%. The World Bank report on Nigeria today is going to also be unveiled. We'll be speaking with the country director and the lead economist for Nigeria later tonight. We'll get a bit more soundbites from them for tomorrow morning, if there's any new thoughts we can get. But the whole idea of this report is to give Nigeria government the policy options for job creation and business opportunities in the country. Thank you, Temple.
Thank you very much, Bosin, and for all of those updates. Thanks a great deal. Joshua, your thoughts before we get to Ali?
Well, okay. So what I want to focus on real quick is just the fact that companies like we had already expected are still, dipping into the capital market, specifically, in terms of commercial papers. I mean, raising 1.02 billion naira. Due to the fact that the current yield environment is still pretty attractive for most companies who want to raise debt. Obviously due to the fact that government debt is currently trading, generally below 10%, especially on the T-bill side. So it's still very attractive for any company that wants to come into the market to raise any kind of debt. And we've seen a lot of companies take advantage of this. We've seen MTN, we've seen the Dangote Group, we've seen a couple of companies in the Dangote Group do that, Nigerian breweries and some other banks as well. So generally, I think the expectation is that this kind of thing will continue, obviously due to the fact that, a lot of investors, a lot of foreign investors who are not even able to, exit the Nigerian market will still be circling and looking for attractive opportunities within the Nigerian market in order to continue to reinvest until the time comes when they are able to exit the market. So I think a lot of companies will continue to take advantage of that, and I expect to see, one or two more, or definitely more than one or two, as the second half of the year kicks off.
Thanks a great deal for that, Joshua. Ali, Bosin did mention earlier about the multilateral institutions that are looking to finance the developing world. Your thoughts on that, please?
Yes, there's some interesting curveballs in that. I mean, let's see if that money comes through. I know President Macron, for example, has been talking pretty vociferously about selling some gold in order to fund the recovery. The problem for me right now is essentially, you're talking about raising money for COVID. A lot of our governments did receive money specifically for COVID. We don't know where that money's gone. Let me be frank. That's why we're in the situation we are now, which is 1% vaccination across the continent and a Delta variant, which is running a riot over so many different places. We know in Kinshasa, DR Congo, Uganda, South Africa, and other places. So, my question is, the application of funds towards assisting Africa to emerge from the pandemic is one. Let's see, because that could be a very difficult situation. We're hearing from Uganda, for example, lack of oxygen already, no vaccines and so forth. And then the question is to fund the recovery, which is important. Now, my question with the funding the recovery is, have you seen a very coherent, articulate policy towards funding sub-Saharan Africa's recovery? I certainly haven't. And I'm not seeing it out of the existing policy makers that we have in place. I just think that, it's a little bit like Groundhog Day with these guys. They're just going to do the same thing. Where is the policy, the future-proof policy to apply funds to creating jobs for our people, creating opportunity, and creating a sustainable recovery? Maybe Mr. Adesina at the African Development Bank articulates it well, but does he have the ability to execute? Probably not. He's dependent on each of these different countries. And do we have the policymakers there you can point at and say, my God, he's talking about what I want to be hearing? I haven't heard one of them. I really haven't, except maybe the central bank governor at the South African Reserve Bank. He seems to know what's going on. But the rest of them, it's more of the same. It's very upsetting. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Ali, for that. And we do know that there's another blueprint that the AFDB will be releasing early next month. We'll watch out to see how that's, we'll watch out for that, basically keep an eye on that. South African markets now, where South Africa has just signed a plan to support 600 billion rands steel industry. Sanlam Life Insurance buys risk and retail life business of Alexander Forbes. Sasol sells air separation units business to Air Liquide. Moody's has just released an update or a rating on Transnet, and it says Transnet's BA2 Corporation family rating outlook is negative. Seedco expects profit before tax for financial year 2021 to be 50% better on sales. Your thoughts again, Ali, before we get to Bosun?
Yes, Temple, just to get back to your questions about South Africa. I think, firstly, look, we've been talking about COVID. We've got to worry about COVID in South Africa. We're in wave 3 there. Numbers keep spiking. And there is some real concern from all the virologists I follow in South Africa. I think Ramaphosa's caught in a trap here. He doesn't want to go down the way of a lockdown, hard lockdown, and stall what is a nascent recovery, which is building momentum. Agriculture has been good. A lot of demand for South African exports have also been supportive. They've created a current account surplus now for a number of months. So, he'll be keen to try and get through this as best as he can. And I think that's going to be his main challenge. The plan to support the steel industry, there's been phenomenal demand for steel. It's been quite off the charts. I think, that's a clever bet. Put more money to work in that area. I've got no issue with that. And then Transnet BA2 Corp, Transnet, of course, is the railway service, and there were a lot of scandals, if you remember, around the purchase of locomotives. But, South Africa's got a sophisticated railway network in place. And I think, given that the government stands behind it, Moody's ratings action is just going to make people look at it as an attractive pickup versus government paper, which has been performing really well for quite a while.
Thank you very much, Ali. Joshua, one or two things to say about the steel industry plans of South Africa?
Well, I think the most important thing to note or to highlight here is obviously the fact that this has to have a positive effect on employment and on output and production in the country. Obviously, we've spoken on this program about the issues that we've had in South Africa with regards to unemployment and economic outputs. Obviously, South Africa is struggling to recover from their recent recession and the fact that there is massive unemployment in the country. So I think any kind of plan that will reinvigorate one of their, core industries will have a positive effect on this, and hopefully will start to generate some sort of employment and output in general. I think that is the angle that we should look at.
If you permit me, Temple, Joshua, I just wanted to find out from Joshua. I was looking at the Sanlam story on insurance. Here was just a week ago, Hess Holdings floating a Hess insurance company and a Hess life assurance as well, two companies at the same time into Nigeria's insurance space. What's your take on that?
Well, okay, so the thing about the Nigerian insurance industry is that, as we know, due to maybe cultural beliefs and, the way historically we've always approached insurance, there's a lot of headroom, and, there's a very high ceiling for insurance in Nigeria, in Africa in general as well, because, definitely the continent is underinsured in a very massive way. So I think any company that is entering this market is hoping to, capture a fresh group and sort of open up new markets, because it's not really, if you look at, market share within the industry, there's a lot of headroom just in terms of completely uninsured individuals, whether it be, life insurance, like you mentioned. And so I think finding a way to sell that or market that to individuals who need it but don't know they need it or don't believe that they need it, or for whatever reason are not willing to, adopt it, is going to be a very key battle to win. And I think, obviously we can look to markets like South Africa on ways that they've been able to, successfully adopt a more general insurance culture that we don't currently have in Nigeria. But the truth is, legislation is another thing that could actually bridge that gap, because if the National Assembly was to, put in laws that made other forms of insurance necessary or made them mandatory like they are in, some Western countries, then we would see, a much larger market. And I think this is something that we've been pushing for, is just trying to encourage people to get this insurance in order to, mitigate against any, future eventuality. And that is really the biggest challenge.
Maybe. I get your point. For example, in a place like Nigeria, if you attach insurance to business registration, for example, whenever anybody registers a business, whether it's a one-man business or what you call retail business or a limited liability, you just make sure that there must be an insurance before you get your certificate of incorporation as an entity. Maybe that will all help, because you have a whole lot of folks out there who are registering enterprises, small-scale enterprises and what have you, without insurance. Maybe if we need to tie it at the point of registration with a valid insurance before you take your corporate, it comes as part of your registration. Maybe. Yeah, I'm just thinking. I'm just thinking. Then when you are doing your annual filings, whatever, you also show proof of insurance. But anyway, let's leave that for another day. Thank you. Sorry, my apologies, Tim.
Okay, so Northern African markets now, where Kuwait Insurance is to set up new life insurer in Egypt with 100 million Egyptian pounds. Eptica is set to go public with its IPO on EGX by fourth quarter of 2021. Electro Cable Egypt posts 9 million Egyptian pounds profits in the first quarter of 2021. Label V Group opens 12 Carrefour supermarkets in Morocco, and OCP Group raises $1.5 billion on global debt markets. Talking about insurance, which Bosun you just mentioned.
Insurance on my mind.
Yeah, Bosun, do you want your thoughts? I mean, on from the
let me allow Ali to weigh into the Northern African insurance space. It looks like insurance folks are coming through all these days since the Alliance folks came to Kenya and took a chunk of their insurance, I think about 5 and they're still bidding for more.
No, absolutely. I think I've spoken to a number of these international insurance companies, all of whom see Africa as the great growth market, predominantly because of the lack of penetration. Here in Kenya, you're talking about 3% or maybe around that sort of figure penetration. So they're all looking at it not as a short-term get in, get out trade. They're looking at it for a medium to long-term trade. And I think that's bringing more expertise and is putting a reasonable price under most of the existing insurance companies. Obviously, Egypt, I mean, is a no-brainer. 110 million people, makes a lot of sense to get into that market, and I think that's proof of that. If I can just touch on a couple of the other headlines. 12th Carrefour supermarket in Morocco. I mean, it's interesting because we have Carrefour here, and I'm watching these guys. They really have a top quality product, a great supply chain, and are leveraging it to good effect in key places in Africa. And I think most of them are just targeting the metropolises where you got density of people. And then you've got several headlines on Egypt here. Eptica to go public, that's a good sign. IPO in the Egyptian market, and OCP Group raising $1.5 billion on the global debt market. That's no easy thing to do. That's a pretty significant development and a pretty significant capital call as well.
Many thanks. Thanks a great deal, Ali. But Joshua, one or two things to say, and perhaps an outlook on the market for today.
Well, I think obviously coming off the back of this Nigerian market, coming off the back of a public holiday yesterday, yes, last week's market was a little bit mixed, but we did see some positive sentiment towards the end. So I think we can expect a little bit of that to remain in the market, although there is going to likely be some profit taking of some of the names that gained last week. So I think it's going to still be a mixed market. Our market hasn't really recovered. We still haven't seen the FPIs return to the equity space, but definitely we've seen some value appreciation in the last couple of weeks. So hopefully that is an encouraging sign that there will be more positive days ahead.
All right, then, Bosse, any final thoughts?
Yeah, the OCP story caught my attention because that OCP Group in Morocco was the phosphate fertilizer company that Nigeria signed a deal with, a multi-billion US dollar, I think about $2 billion deal, whatever, in a couple of months ago. I think in the first half of this year, by the way, just a few months ago in the first half. So going to the market to the $1.5 billion is good news. Let's see how it all plays out. By the way, Nigeria's inflation will be out at 2 o'clock later today. That's according to the Statistician General. We just got some information that's coming out at 2 o'clock. Everyone keep an eye on that. Thank you, Temple.
And tomorrow we'll be able to hear from Vertiva if the outcome of the inflation data is in line with the expectations or not. Thank you, gentlemen, for making this show possible this morning. Joshua Odebisi, who joined us from Vertiva Capital in Lagos, thanks a great deal. Ali Kansachu from Nairobi, Kenya, thank you so much. Bosin Amanfaye, thanks a great deal for your constant editorial on the show. This has been the program for today. Frontier Opening Bell. I'm Temple Ashaju. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.